As the day's final light stretched across the land, the village of Nyabongo whispered the tales of the past. The air hummed with the sounds of water lapping against wooden canoes and the low murmur of elders. The fishermen, their faces browned by the sun and bodies seasoned by the waves, were preparing for the night. They gathered their nets, each knowing the lake like the back of their hands, but none more skilled than Jabari. Jabari, a man whose fame had traveled far beyond Nyabongo shores, was known not just for the size of his catch, but for his unyielding restlessness. While others were content with their lives, Jabari's heart burned with an insatiable desire. He was not satisfied with his fishing, not satisfied with his home, and not satisfied with the respect he earned. He gazed at the water, watching the ripples shift and disappear, much like the fleeting peace in his chest. "There is more for me," he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible against the evening breeze. His mind swirled with thoughts of untold riches, fame, and a life larger than what the humble lake and village could offer. And so, while the others sang and shared stories beneath the baobab tree, Jabari felt a pull, a yearning that could not be quieted by the love of his family or the admiration of his peers. It was a hunger that no fish could fill. As Jabari prepared to leave the shore and retreat to the solitude of his home, a strange sound broke the silence, the soft crunch of footsteps upon the earth, faint but unmistakable. He turned, heart skipping a beat, and there stood a figure, cloaked in black, as if the night itself had taken shape and walked toward him. The stranger's face was hidden beneath the hood, his eyes gleaming like twin stars. His presence felt ancient, as if he had been born from the very earth beneath Jabari's feet. A soft wind stirred, and the stranger's cloak seemed to swirl, alive with secrets of the past. "Jabari," the voice was low like the distant call of a storm carrying the weight of ancient winds. "I can make you the richest fisherman this lake has ever known." Jabari stood, frozen. This was no ordinary man. His heartbeat quickened and his mind raced with possibilities. "What must I give in return?" Jabari asked, his voice almost a whisper, as though afraid to speak too loudly and break the magic of the moment. The stranger's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Something you will not miss, your shadow." Jabari laughed at first, thinking it a joke. A shadow? It was only a reflection of light, a trick of the sun. What harm could it do to give it away? His eyes widened as the stranger stepped forward, the moonlight catching the stranger's outstretched hand. A strange chill swept over Jabari's body as if the very air had thickened, his breath turning to ice. In that moment, Jabari did not hesitate. With a quick nod, he agreed, "I accept." And just like that, his shadow was gone, lost to the stranger in a single breath. At first, nothing seemed amiss. The sun rose the next day, its light creeping over the horizon and warming the earth. Jabari stepped out onto the sand, but as he looked down, there was no shadow to greet him. A chill ran down his spine, and for a fleeting moment, his heart raced in fear. Then, nothing. He shrugged it off, thinking it to be a trick of the light. Over the following days, the world seemed to bend in Jabari's favor. His nets, once a tool of necessity, became the source of endless fortune. The lake, which had once been an unpredictable mistress, now poured its bounty into his hands. Every cast of his net seemed to return with treasure, and his reputation grew with each passing day. His humble home transformed into a palace, adorned with fine carvings and bright, colorful cloths. His wife, Amina, wore necklaces of gold and beads from distant lands. His children ran through the village with laughter in their voices and joy in their hearts. But despite all his wealth, Jabari could not shake the feeling that something was missing. The absence of his shadow hung like a dark cloud following him wherever he went. People looked at him with a mixture of awe and unease. They praised his wealth, but feared the emptiness in his eyes. And worse still, Jabari began to feel the weight of their gazes, their whispers. His wealth grew, but with each passing day, he began to wonder if it was truly worth the price. It wasn't just the villagers who had begun to notice. Everywhere Jabari went, there was a sudden stillness. The children, who once ran to greet him with open arms, now watched him from the shadows. The women of the village, who used to smile warmly at him, now crossed the street when he passed, pulling their children close as if by instinct. Even Zuri, his precious daughter, no longer ran to him with the joy she once had. Her eyes no longer sparkled with the same love and trust. She hesitated when she saw him, her small hand lingering in the air before she reached out to touch him. "Baba, where did you go? I see you, but you are not here." The words pierced his heart like an arrow. What did she mean? Of course, he was here. Wasn't he the same father she had once adored? But something in her eyes told him otherwise. She had known in the pure way of children that he was missing something vital, something more important than all the wealth he had amassed. Jabari walked the market the next day, the hustle of the village surrounding him, but there was an unnatural quiet in the air. The voices that once greeted him with warmth now fell silent. The traders with their bright fabrics, the children with their toys, all ceased their chatter when he passed, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and fear. It was as if the villagers could sense that Jabari, despite his wealth, was not truly all whole. His fame, his fortune, it all seemed hollow now, and it was only then, as he saw the unease in their eyes, that the weight of his bargain truly sank in. He had gained riches beyond belief, but in doing so, he had lost something far more precious, his soul. The lake, once his greatest ally, now mocked him. Each time Jabari cast his nets into the shimmering waters, they returned empty. The fish that had once swarmed around him as if they were his companions now eluded his grasp, slipping away into the deep, cool waters. Days turned into weeks, and Jabari's wealth began to dwindle. His grand home, once filled with the laughter of his family, began to fade into disrepair. The once shining gold of his necklaces dulled, and his luxurious fabrics became threadbare. His once beautiful wife, Amina, looked at him with sorrowful eyes, her face now etched with worry. Even his children, who once looked at him as a hero, now avoided his gaze, as if unsure whether the man who stood before them was truly their father. The villagers, too, began to avoid him. They no longer came to him for advice or aid. The elders, who had once spoken with him beneath the baobab tree, now sat in silence, their eyes heavy with the knowledge that Jabari had crossed a line from which there was no return. Jabari could feel it. His shadow, his very essence, was gone. He had traded it for fleeting wealth, and now the world around him had turned its back. His soul, it seemed, could not be bought or bartered. The price he had paid was greater than any gold he could ever possess. Desperation drove Jabari to places even the bravest of men would fear to tread. He wandered far beyond the village, to the marshlands where the air was thick and heavy with mystery. The mist rose around his ankles, curling like tendrils of smoke, while the trees around him stood like silent sentinels, their branches reaching toward the heavens like skeletal fingers. Jabari's heart pounded with every step, for he knew what he sought was dangerous. He sought the stranger, the one who had taken his shadow, and he would do anything to reclaim it. Through the thick mist, Jabari saw a figure emerge, standing in the center of a clearing. The stranger, cloaked in his dark robes, stood unmoving, his presence as commanding as ever. The wind did not touch him, nor did the mist cloud his vision. It was as if he were untouched by time itself. "Take my wealth," Jabari pleaded, his voice raw with desperation. "Take everything I have. Just give me back my shadow." The stranger's smile was cold, unreadable. "A man who loses himself must walk a long road to find his way back," he said, his voice soft yet final. Jabari fell to his knees, begging, but the stranger's form remained unmoving, unyielding. The world around him seemed to close in, and Jabari felt the weight of his own empty existence pressing down on him. With time, Jabari began to understand that redemption could not be bought. It could only be earned. He shed his wealth, his fine clothes, and his pride, choosing instead to walk the path of humility. He mended the fences of his neighbors, carrying water for the elderly, offering his help without expecting anything in return. Slowly but surely, the villagers began to notice the change in him. The coldness that once surrounded him began to fade, replaced by warmth. One evening, beneath the great baobab tree, Jabari gathered the children around him, just as he had done in the past. He told them stories, not of riches or glory, but of kindness, humility, and the importance of knowing oneself. The elders, too, began to nod in approval, and the smiles of the villagers returned. Jabari was no longer just the wealthy fisherman. He had become a man of wisdom, a man of the people, one who understood the true value of life. One morning, as the first rays of the sun began to creep over the horizon, Jabari stood by the lake. The waters shimmered as the world awoke around him. He breathed deeply, taking in the fresh morning air, and as he looked down, something extraordinary happened. There, at his feet, stretched his shadow, long and strong as it had once been. A deep sense of peace washed over him, and in that moment, Jabari understood. His shadow had not returned because he had found wealth, but because he had found himself again. He smiled, a smile full of wisdom, knowing that true wealth lies not in gold or land, but in the light that we carry within us. As the villagers gathered around, Jabari spoke softly, his voice full of warmth and understanding. "A man's wealth is not in what he owns, but in the light that follows him." As the village came alive, Jabari looked out over the horizon, his heart full. His journey had been long, but it had taught him the greatest lesson of all, that a man's true wealth is measured not by his possessions, but by the legacy of kindness, humility, and wisdom he leaves behind. What do you think of Jabari's journey? Have you ever chased something, only to realize what you truly needed was already with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more legendary African tales.